He almost ignored the warning. That would have been his biggest mistake. The thing about Siberian Huskies is that their faces do not give you much to work with. The pale blue eyes and the geometric mask markings and the particular set of their expressions make them look perpetually either mildly alarmed or mildly amused, and it is difficult, even for people who have lived with them for years, to distinguish between the two. Which is why, when Koda started pushing Mila, Jonah Reyes read it as playfulness and felt only a moderate level of concern. Koda was 3 years old. Mila was 22 months. Solid and fearless in the way of toddlers who have spent their whole lives around a dog twice their size and have never been given a reason to be. Cautious. She had learned to walk by pulling herself up on Koda's back. She had learned to run by chasing him around the backyard. They had an established dynamic, and that dynamic involved Mila attempting things and Koda tolerating them with the patient amusement of an animal that understood it was not in charge but had accepted the situation. Which is why the Tuesday afternoon behavior made no sense. It was late October. The back door of the family's split level opened to a small deck. 2 steps down, and then the yard. Mila had been using the back door area to play for months, a routine they had established because it kept her contained and gave her the outdoor adjacent stimulation she preferred. The door was propped open with a brick. Koda usually lay in the doorway, the threshold between inside and out, which is where Huskies often choose to be. That afternoon, every time Mila moved toward the door to go out to the deck, Koda moved in front of her. Not dramatically, not aggressively. He just positioned himself, stood in the gap. When she reached around him, he shifted. When she pushed against his flank with both hands to get past, he didn't growl, didn't snap, but he planted and she couldn't shift him. When she sat down frustrated, he took 1 step back. When she tried again, same thing. He wasn't hurting her. He wasn't threatening her. He was simply, systematically not allowing her through the door. Mila thought it was a game. She giggled the first 2 times. By the 3rd time, she was starting to cry. Not from fear. From the specific frustration of a toddler who has decided what she wants and cannot access it. She sat down in her blue dress on the kitchen floor and looked at the dog, and then looked at her father. Jonah said, "Koda, move." Koda looked at him, did not move. Jonah physically walked him aside, and Koda went, but then circled back and positioned himself in the doorway again before Mila could get up. Jonah's wife Carmen watched it from the hallway. She said, "How long has he been doing this?" Jonah said, "About 20 minutes. Carmen said, "That's weird." Jonah said, "Yeah." Neither of them went to look at the deck. If you stay for stories about what animals sense, before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. They redirected Mila to the front room and closed the back door. Koda lay against it from the inside, nose pressed to the gap at the bottom. The specific posture of a dog whose attention is still on whatever is on the other side. That night, Jonah went out to put the recycling bin in and nearly stepped on it. A wasp nest, ground level, built against the side of the bottom deck step facing outward, invisible from the doorway or from standing height, only visible from below or from the side if you knew to look. It was large, the size of a rugby ball, late season, which meant the wasps inside were at peak aggression. Mila weighed 24 pounds. She had been stung once the summer before by a single yellow jacket, and her arm had swollen to the wrist. They did not yet know if she had an allergy. They had not yet had reason to test it. The bottom step was exactly where she would have placed her foot first going out to the deck. The nest was exactly where her foot would have landed. Jonah stood in the yard for a long time looking at the nest and then at the step, and then at the door. Koda was watching him through the glass. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. The pest control company came Wednesday morning. The technician said the nest had been there for approximately 8 to 10 weeks, growing through the fall, and that a late-season ground nest of that size disturbed by foot traffic would have produced a sustained aggressive response. Multiple stings, fast, without warning. He asked if they had any pets. Jonah said, yes, a husky. The technician said, did the dog react to the deck recently? Jonah said, he blocked the door for about half an hour yesterday afternoon. The technician wrote something in his clipboard. He said, dogs smell the pheromones from a nest like this from a significant distance. The colony was probably ramping up its defensive chemistry over the past few days as the temperatures started dropping. Your dog picked it up. He said, good dog. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Carmen found the security camera footage from Tuesday while the pest control truck was still in the driveway. The exterior camera on the back of the house had captured the afternoon's events from a different angle. You could see Koda in the doorway. You could see Mila reaching around him. You could see Jonah walking the dog aside. You could also see, if you knew where to look, a cluster of wasp activity around the bottom step at exactly the time Mila had been trying to get through. Carmen watched it twice. Then she put her phone down on the counter and stood in the kitchen for a while. Koda was in his usual doorway position. The back door was closed. The nest was gone. Everything was exactly as it had always been, except for the knowledge of what had almost not been. She said, good boy, Koda, to the kitchen in general without looking at him. He exhaled once, slow and even, and put his chin on his paws. The next story involves a dog who kept going back to the same spot in the garage every day for a week, while his family called it anxiety, and called it habit, and called it everything except what it turned out to be. Stay with us.